Hi, this is this is take 3. Apologies, I'm having some tech issues tonight. I've had 3 full starts. I think I've gone live and then it's disappeared. I'm going to start again. Day 17, take 3 of Build Your Belonging. And this evening, I want to talk to you about the importance of really getting to, thank you, Jamie, Mercury retrograde, I can't even say it, you're bang on. I want to talk to you about the importance of really getting to know yourself. Now, if we say that out loud, it can make us feel a bit, it's a bit icky, like, oh God, do I really want to go there? Do I really want to do that? And it's uncomfortable, isn't it? Because maybe we won't like what we find. Maybe we won't be happy with what we discover. And I get it. I really, really get it. And the truth is, until we are embarking on a journey, and I'm really careful with my language because I'm not, I don't want to ever suggest to everybody that there's some destination point that we're working towards here. This is a journey, a lifelong journey. But until we're kind of on that journey to learning more about ourselves, getting to know ourselves, and I mean that from both the shadows and the light, the darkness and the light, until we kind of start to get into a place of acceptance, awareness, giving ourselves permission, we will regularly tip into fitting in rather than belonging. We will regularly seek external validation rather than coming home to ourselves and remembering who we are at our deepest core level and tuning into what matters to us the most. So, getting to know yourself is a really important part of this process. And you can change the language. You don't have to use terminology like I'm getting to know myself. Discovery, rediscovery, reconnection, connection. Thinking about, framing it in a way that works for you and serves you, because there's no right way to do any of this. There is no destination point. There is no 100%, path that is right. And, it's so important to acknowledge that, because if we start to think that there's some destination that we're trying to reach, then we tip into perfectionism, I have to get here because until I get here, then I'm not good enough. And I'm not worthy until I have X, Y, or Z. And, it's not helpful, because we're never going to be good enough if we're thinking along those lines. So I really want to encourage you to see this as a journey and not a destination. And I want to invite you to set an intention of raising awareness, generating acceptance, generating permission. And there's something else I want to add into the mix, and that's compassion, because it is difficult once we start to really uncover what lies beneath the surface and we get into some juicy, meaty things that are uncomfortable. We have to bring compassion in. We have to, because the opposite is shame, and shame never ever works. It never ever works. And it's an ongoing process. And again, why is it important to frame it as a journey? Because we will stumble, we will make mistakes, we will hurt people, we will do things that we don't feel proud of. And that is inevitable, because we're on a journey. We are not looking to some goal of perfection, because there's no such thing. And, so inviting this intention of acceptance, awareness, permission, compassion, and open-heartedness as you go on this journey, because, the more open-hearted we can be, the more compassion we can invite in when that inevitable stumble and tripping and, things not going the way that we want them to arises, we can pick ourselves back up. And we know that we're not starting from scratch, we're starting from a place of experience. So, something really comes up for me when I think about, getting to know myself. And probably what puts most of us off is that I'm not going to like the things that I find out about myself. What if all of those terrible, terrible things that I say to myself about myself are true? And that's, you know, that's a big fear for many of us. And okay, so here's some truth. The answer, the reality is there are going to be parts of you that you don't like. There 100% are going to be elements of your personality, your makeup that you do not like, that you do not approve of currently, that you feel ashamed of. And that is true for every single person. And yes, there's a journey we can go on to, you know, to release the shame and to work through those parts, but there will always be more parts. And I think that's really important to acknowledge, because again, we're not looking to reach a destination here of some kind of perfection where we eradicate all of the bad things. You know, there's just this, it doesn't work like that. And when we dislike parts of ourselves, we feel ashamed. Shame is a massive toxic emotion that we experience, and shame keeps us stuck and silent because we don't share the things that we feel ashamed about with other people. So we bury it deep, we stuff it down, and we never get, you know, nothing ever changes for us, because, you know, this cycle continues on, and we essentially try and hide those parts of ourselves. Now, the truth is, you cannot selectively block out the parts that you don't like. You cannot. Let's say you have what might be considered a bad temper. Let's say you've been admonished in the past for having a bad temper, so you really desperately try and shut that part of you down. Or any parts of you that you are trying to shut down and eradicate, you will inevitably dim your light to, because you will keep yourself at a lower level. Stay quiet, stay small, don't say too much, don't be too much, don't ever let that anger rear its ugly head. And so, you know, we cannot selectively block out the dark without blocking out the light too, without your light being dimmed. And something I know from kind of following Brené Brown for many, many years, and if you haven't yet watched anything of hers, go Google her and some amazing TED Talks that she's done. What she says is the antidote to shame is to speak shame, is to speak our truth. But that has to be done with somebody who has earned the right to hear our story. And what that means is we can trust them. So what we don't want to do, and this is something I've been guilty of in the past, is kind of like bearing my soul to people, thinking that was a way to be seen, you know, just tell everybody my kind of deepest, darkest secrets, thinking I was being vulnerable. And I didn't have the relationship with those people where I could really trust them to hold that information, and, you know, and it backfired. So we need to share our stories with people who we can really trust. So people that we know will hold space for us. They're not going to tell us what to do. They're not going to try and jump in and fix it. They're not going to make us feel ashamed even further. They're just going to be able to hold space. And whether that's someone that you know, or that's, you know, a professional person that you go to have that space is important in order for shame to be released. And essentially, the truth will set you free. If you can speak your truth, if you can speak about your experiences that you're holding shame around, you will release something. You know, the shame will release. It's not a quick fix. It doesn't solve everything, but releasing shame unlocks something. It gets things moving. You're not being stuck and held back by it. And the other thing to bear in mind is that, you know, these are parts of us. The things that we worry about, or the elements of us that we dislike, you know, for me, growing up, I'm too sensitive. I'm too sensitive. So that has led to me struggling for most of my life with dealing with, you know, sadness. I struggle with sadness. I struggle to work through sadness when it comes up, which it inevitably does because I'm human. I feel it a lot. I feel it, you know, more than perhaps the general population, or, you know, I consider myself to be highly sensitive. So someone someone else who's highly sensitive, that would resonate with them. They would feel the same. They feel their emotions in a big way. But for me, that's something I struggled with, and I saw it as defining me. Like, I'm too much because I'm too sensitive, and it becomes this big global problem for me. So I shrink down, stay small. Don't say too much. Don't speak out. Don't ever be anything that might be too much for people to manage. And if we can start to look at these elements as just parts of us, and if you think of yourself as a mosaic, you are made up of lots of different parts, and those parts all deserve compassion, all of them, even the ones that are harder to accept. Shaming ourselves has never worked. It just doesn't work. And so what I'm going to really encourage here is, a way to get to know yourself, or to rediscover, reconnect, is to think about how you could map out those parts of you. And the way to do that is to actively notice in any given moment a part of you that is in play. So for example, if you feel sad, the sad part of me is activated at the moment. I feel angry. The angry part of me is activated. I'm feeling connected. The connected part of me is activated. So it's the positive and the negative. And again, I'm really careful of using terminology like that, because I'm not saying good or bad. It's how we feel about those emotions. But noticing that those parts of you are activated and starting to kind of map them out. And those parts of you will become activated in, lots of different situations. But when we notice that it's a part of us rather than the whole of us, we can step back a little and observe it with way more objectivity than we might do if we just think we're a bad person for feeling angry. I am the anger, therefore I'm a bad person. And there might be things like I am scared, the scared part of me, the ashamed part of me, the embarrassed part of me, the depressed part of me. I mean, there's no end to the elements and parts of us that can exist. But see if you can identify which part of you is activated at, any given time, and see if you can start a dialogue with that part of you. So this really involves you taking a step back and looking at the part of you that is in play and thinking, first of all, what part of me is this? And then what is this part of me trying to do? What is it trying to achieve? What's its purpose? What's its intention? How do I feel about this part of me? What does this part of me need right now? More often than not, it's love and compassion and understanding and being seen. But really talk yourself through that process. So, what is this part that's activated? What's its purpose? How do I feel about it? And what does it need? It can be really lovely, deliberate steps to working through these challenging emotions and getting to know yourself at a really deep core level. Because then, once you know which parts of you have been activated and you recognise what these parts of you need, when they are activated in the future, you then know what you need to do to tend to them, because you know what it is. Maybe you need some space, maybe you need some distance, maybe you need some love. Whatever it is, you can start to tend to it. And, and a huge reminder that this is a journey, not a destination. We're not looking to fix any of these things. See this as a moving piece of work. And so my invitation to you is to think about where you could start with this right now. What part of you, how are you feeling as you listen to me say these words to you? What parts of you do you feel activated? Maybe there's some shame, maybe there's some embarrassment, maybe there's discomfort, like, the uncomfortable part of me says, I don't want to do this. I'm worried that I'm not going to like what I find. And just start there. Start with whatever is coming up for you right now in this moment. And ask yourselves these questions. Firstly, what would I call this part of me? What is it trying to achieve? Is it just trying to get my attention? Is it trying to keep me safe ultimately? And how do I feel about this part of me? And what does it need? What does this part of me need? And what is really important to mention is that the elements of yourself that you dislike were coping mechanisms for you at one time that you established to keep yourself safe in a particular environment. So if you are, if you find it difficult to speak out, you find it difficult to give your opinion in a conflict or a difficult situation, and you get really frustrated with yourself about that, then it's likely that at some point you have had to stay quiet and small to cope in a difficult situation. Let's say you grew up in a chaotic home, lots of arguing, and you needed to keep quiet in that situation. So that's what you've learned. So it's not your fault. We are so clever. Our bodies and minds and hearts are so clever in the way that we take care of ourselves. And so these are coping mechanisms that we have established in our lives, but that probably don't serve us anymore. They are things that we put into place when we were young. We needed those coping mechanisms. We don't need them anymore. They're parts of us that need some attention, that need some love. And by giving them our attention and giving them our love and compassion, we can start to soothe them. And they can, it's time for them to go, to let go. And just remember again, it's a journey, not a destination. So yes, we might heal parts of ourselves. There'll always be other things. But the more literate we become, the quicker that process happens. I promise you. I'm living it. This is how I'm journeying through my own emotions now. And it becomes a lot quicker. It becomes a lot easier to release the more challenging. And finally, as a closing point, I would also encourage you to look for the glimmers. And I mentioned this a couple of days ago. So to look for the parts of you that, are fun when they're activated. So I was talking, before we went on holiday, I was talking to my daughter about, the feelings about being excited about going on holiday. And I asked her, where do you feel it? And she said, it's a bubbly feeling up here around my heart. And I was like, great, now really notice, because what does that mean for you? And she's like, well, I'm excited, I can't wait to go. I love listening to people talking about us going on holiday. It activates that feeling. And, those are the glimmers, those are the feel good. And they are parts of us too, the happy, excited, content, joyful parts of ourselves. And they are important to note too, because, nerves and excitement can feel quite similar. So let's get really clear on, which parts of ourselves are activated at any one time. So it's not just about looking for the shadow. It's also about looking for the light and getting, mapping out. Think about creating this beautiful map of all of the parts of you, and really knowing yourself at a level that you can hold yourself through whatever is going on. Okay, so that's it for today. So that's day 17. We've got 4 more days after this. So yeah, it's been amazing. Thank you so much for watching. And tomorrow I'm going to be talking to you about values. And I love talking about values, because values, the way I've been taught to look at values through some coaching that I've had in the past is so different from perhaps what you might think. So this is not a case of I'm going to handpick some values that I want. I'm going to talk to you about how our values are intrinsic, a core to us. They're just innate, and they're not things that we choose. They're just a part of us, and how we can tap into them and tune into them, and the value of doing that. So I'm really looking forward to tomorrow. Thank you for watching. Any questions, any comments, pop them in the comments or drop me an email, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.